Welcome to our Bard's Tale 4 developer commentary. I'm David Rogers, lead designer, and I'll be your guide on today's adventure. The quest of my adventurers, Maeve, Tommen, and Sven, has led them through the Ficti Forest, which neighbors Skara Brae, to the mouth of the forbidden Charn dungeon. We treat our outdoor areas much like dungeons, full of twists and turns, traps, puzzles, and monsters. Our adventurers have just emerged from the hostile portion of the Ficti Forest, and are now approaching the Charn dungeon itself.
Do the rest of you hear that?
Here, you hear an example of party chatter. As your party explores the world, you'll hear them talking amongst themselves about what they're seeing. Now, before we go any further, we heard you loud and clear. We won't be having the portraits bounce as they talk. This was a first pass at that system, and we're now exploring other ways to convey who's speaking. The goal is still the same though. Enhanced companions are one of our stretch goals that we're including in the game. And we want our companions to have personalities, opinions, and relationships with one another. We're using free move mode right now, but we know that grid movement is important to you. So at any time, you can switch to grid movement mode. Our entire world is traversable using grid movement. Our grid is actually a web of nodes, which allows us to better shape paths so they neatly conform to a regular terrain. But we took special care to compass align the overall grid, so that the most hardcore among us could better map out the dungeons on graph paper. This is an enemy vignette, something we're able to set up to help tell stories and make the dungeons feel lived in. These goblins are here to loot the Charn vault, but weren't expecting visitors. My party decided to avoid them altogether, but this isn't a cutscene. You can walk down there and put an end to their looting. Here, we see The Stone Remembers, an example of our songs of exploration. As you adventure, you collect magical songs that grant your party new abilities. They might unlock new passages, knock down walls, reveal hidden treasures, or ingratiate you to certain NPCs. Here, The Stone Remembers rebuilds certain broken stonework. The giant glowing sigil is a bit of a dead giveaway, so we're iterating towards trying to strike a balance between too much and too little feedback. This is a Fashan patrol. I see the Fashan as guard dogs of the Charn. Their giant eye and magical vision make them ideal sentries. Patrols work exactly like you'd expect. Enemies have a vision cone, and if they spot you, they enter a brief alerted state where you have a moment to try and escape before combat begins, if you wish. Bard's Tale combat has always been tactical, but often you find yourself using the same tactics fight after fight. We set out to make each combat a puzzle that would keep you changing tactics to adapt to the enemy. We're keeping combat turn-based, but you can now select the order in which your actions execute. We even allow the same character to make multiple actions in a turn. This opens the door for much more elaborate combos. And all of this is managed by opportunity. This goblin grunt spends one opportunity point to move, and another to use hooked stab, which skewers whoever's directly in front of him. In this case, it's Sven, for 10 points of physical damage. However, Sven has 3 armor points, shown here, which reduce the damage down to 7. Now, the Goblin Marksman uses Loose Arrow. Archers are tricky, as they have abilities that can target your adventurers anywhere on the battlefield, though their attacks are generally a little bit weaker. These are the bane of your glass cannon's existence, as their attacks cannot be easily blocked by sturdier fighters. Now, the Fashan is channeling a Hypnotic Eye attack. Unless I can break his focus with 6 mental damage in one turn, he'll unleash a powerful mental AoE attack on Maeve and Tommen. Mental damage is one of our 3 damage types. It ignores enemy armor, and it disrupts enemy focus. Now, it's our turn. I want to burn down that high-health goblin grunt. Since he's got armor, I'll have Sven use Sundering Smash first, to rend that armor right off of him. With the rest of Sven's attacks on cooldown, I'll have Sven swap places with Tommen, our bard, so Tommen can use Storm of Blades on the Goblin Grunt. But before I do, I'm gonna have Tommen chug some grog. This grants him spell points, and empowers his next attack with belligerent knockback. This can throw enemies out of position, forcing them to spend opportunity to get back into range for their next attack.
You don't look so tough.
Storm of Blades does great damage, but because it's split into 3 separate attacks, each one can be reduced by the goblin's armor individually. So it's good that Sven tore down the goblin's armor first. Brimming with spell points, Tommen can sing Wayland's Watch, which reduces the strength of affected enemies. We visually interpreted this as enemies being shrunk. As we build abilities, we try to go the extra mile to build personality moments into our enemies, like how the goblins are jerks, and they're mocking each other for being debuffed. Not every enemy will react to everything, but you'll be treated to a little Easter egg once in a while. Lastly, Maeve has some powerful spells, but needs to generate spell points to cast them, so she channels Meditate. This is a clever move in several ways. At the end of the turn, the Vishal's attack will go off, but we've shrunk it to reduce its strength, so I know it won't do enough damage to break Maeve's focus. Also, focusing is an effective defense against mental damage, as mental damage is first dealt to the focus meter before it's dealt to your health.
What was that?
Looks like we're not alone in this room. What you're seeing here is a special event, which we're setting up for specific combat encounters. These will add curveballs and unique challenges to certain fights. We want to keep you guessing and on your toes during combat. Not every combat will have scripted elements like this, but expect it to occur in certain fights, and particularly in boss fights. The Vishal's Hypnotic Eye attack goes off. Maeve weathers the blow with her focus intact. Sven isn't so lucky, and takes 6 mental damage. It cuts right through his armor. The Goblin Marksmen hit us with a few shots, but thankfully, the Wayland's Watch debuff has softened their attacks. The Vishal uses Lunging Talon, which moves him forward as a side effect of the attack. Certain attacks can cause you or the enemy to change position. Meanwhile, the Goblin spends an opportunity to move forward, attack, and then drops into Coward's Defense. Coward's Defense is a stance. This works similarly to channeling as we saw earlier, except the ability comes into effect immediately and doesn't end until his focus is broken. Coward's Defense grants the Goblin bonus armor, countering Tommen's Storm of Blades. As the enemy ends its turn, Wayland's Watch wears off. Maeve's meditation is now complete, and she gains 1 spell point. It's our second turn, which means some of Sven's more powerful abilities are now off of cooldown and ready to be used. I move him into position and then use Maeve's levitate ability to set up a double kill.
Away with it.
Sven has basic alchemy knowledge, which allows him to be armed with a potion of power during combat. He chugs the potion for a boost in strength before launching a devastating AoE attack that kills both enemies. He's pretty stoked about it, so he has a little celebration. Tommen's having a hard time getting through the Goblin's armor, so Maeve steps in to help. She launches Mangar's Mind Jab, which does enough damage to knock the Goblin out of his shield stance and fry his brain. The Goblin plays a custom Psychic Death animation, built for just such an occasion. Looks like our mysterious Alpha Predator has returned, and isn't taking too kindly to all these intruders in his lair. It's a deadly redcap. He's an example of an enemy who takes up multiple grid squares, a concept we're toying with to portray our particularly large enemies. A few things to mention as we draw a curtain over our party's uncertain fate. I played purposefully slow for this video to help show off what's going on. Also, not all combats are this drawn out, with multiple waves and boss encounters. Many fights are fast-paced puzzles that are over in just 1 or 2 turns, that test a specific set of skills and cause attrition to unprepared parties. We also added a ton of mouse smoothing, specifically for this video so the camera would be easier to follow. I hope this has shed some light on the inner workings of combat, as well as the wider exploration gameplay. We think this is a deep system with tons of room for tactical growth and complexity, and we can't wait to share the rest of it with you. That's all for now. Stay tuned for more exciting future updates.